All right. Welcome everyone to another live stream episode. We have a very exciting guest today. So on today's Pathways to Informatics interview, where we interview various informatics professionals about their career journeys to give students an idea of all the different pathways that are out there. I'm your host, Brian, and today's guest is Dr. Tricia Lee Rolle. I'll let Tricia do a brief introduction, and then afterwards we can jump right into the questions. So, Tricia, why don't you take it away?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Brian, thank you so much for inviting me on. I think this is a great program you're doing just to get more information out there to students about what the different options are, not just for informatics, but just in general as they're thinking about, their own careers. I don't know what to say about myself. I feel like we're probably going to dig into all of it through this interview. But I'm a pharmacist, also a health services researcher, work for the government. I feel like some of the questions you sent me, Brian, you're going to uncover a lot of different things about me, but I'll kind of pause there just so we can kind of get to, the meat of our conversation. But hopefully this is an interesting interview and helpful for anyone that's considering, informatics and health IT as a career choice.
Yeah, I'm very super excited to dig into these questions because like very few people I feel as though post pharmacy pursue your career path, and even fewer will go into government after that. So I think it'll be very exciting. Well, thanks for that introduction. We're gonna definitely get more into the meat of it. Just for housekeeping purposes, because this is a live stream, we do have a list of questions that we're gonna go through, but we do encourage audience participation. So, feel free to leave comments in, and we'll get to them as we see them come up. Okay, so let's get started. But we'll start off with the icebreaker question. And the icebreaker question is, I found a blog of yours that talked about a new puppy that you got in December 2018 named Cocoa Puff Ramble Roll. Can you share just a few words of your experience and how it's been with the puppy? Well, not a puppy anymore. Over the
Right,
last few
not a
years.
puppy anymore. Well, let's see if Coco's even around. Hey, Coco! I don't know. It's probably his dinner time right now, so I'm sure he's going to choose his dinner over coming to get shown off. So Cocoa Puff Rambo Rowe, he's our dog. I mean, we called him Cocoa Puff just because literally he seems a big chocolatey fur ball. And, my husband, stuck that Rambo in there, just like, we got to give him a tough name. So Cocoa Puff Rambo is his whole name. But, I wrote about that dog just because, I've never had a dog growing up. It was a completely new experience to me. Every time I saw, dog owners, I was like, this is really interesting. But I was that kid who had snails. I had pet snails growing up. So it was a big, complete change from shelled gastropods to the canine species. So yeah, he has been just a joy. I mean, just in so many different ways. I don't have to tell anybody out there who's a dog lover. But yeah, I had to write about him. It was a complete change for me, and I guess kind of taught me for one. Just because I never had a pet like that growing up doesn't mean I can't just embrace something new and just uncover and discover I'm a dog lover at heart.
Yeah, and I feel like it was like good timing too, because with the pandemic happening, I feel like it was nice to have, some type of a pet, a furry pet, especially in dogs. I'm a big dog lover. I don't have one, but I'm sure Coco brought a lot of joy in that sense.
Absolutely.
A little different than snails, though.
Very different than snails. Very.
Okay. So we do have a question. We'll get to it in just a second. Why don't we go ahead with the very first question on our list, and then we can turn it over to the question in the chat.
Sure.
All right. So let's start off with your time in pharmacy school, specifically in the very last 1 to 2 years when you were about to graduate.
The chaos.
Chaos, exactly. Now, from my own experience, when people graduate from pharmacy school, they usually think, usually it's like two paths. It's community with Walgreens and CVS, and then you have hospital. The former being like 6 to 8 years, of school and training, and then the latter is usually like a couple years extra with residency or fellowship. But you took on 4 additional years with a PhD. Now that, like, to me is like, okay, why?
Why?
So that's what we're gonna dig into. So
to yourself.
yeah, what were your thoughts, in those last 2 years, and then ultimately what made you pursue that PhD path?
It's really funny because there was one more option in pharmacy school. There was this nuclear pharmacy everybody was talking about. Ooh, so we were like, what is that? Retail, hospital, and nuclear pharmacy. But I ended up stumbling into pharmacy school. So it really wasn't kind of my first choice. I was kind of hanging out in my freshman, sophomore years. I was hanging out in our pharmaceutical sciences labs. I spent a lot of time working with professors and shadowing graduate students doing pharmacoeconomics research, and working on, this is at University of Buffalo, State University of New York at Buffalo, working on how to deliver cancer drugs to tumor cells with liposomes and targeted drug delivery. That was what I was all wrapped up in, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. But it wasn't really until kind of after that sophomore year when I was just like, is this really for me? And the time in the lab kind of opened up my eyes to realize that, there's bench science, and then there is the world of pharmacy where you can do a lot. You can kind of assist at the bed, you can have clinical practice. You can still be involved in research. So for me, it was kind of like this world that can embrace all of it. So I found myself in pharmacy school. And again, because I was always that person taking internships, I did an internship, an AMCP Pfizer fellowship at the VA. It was with their pharmacoeconomics specialist. And when I discovered pharmacoeconomics and statistics and data and decision analysis, that's when I was like, oh shoot, I need to be a researcher. So for me, I found something that I was really excited and passionate about. So going back to school or continuing studying for a PhD in research and data analysis wasn't really a tough decision for me. I already had a PharmD. I could always work. I just really was super excited and interested in, how does this data science impact how people are making, cost benefit analysis, how people are making big decisions about, how medications can impact, populations of patients. So that's kind of how I fell into the PhD world. And, it was really just this time I spent at a VA with the pharmacoeconomic specialist that kind of opened up my eyes to like, wow, data science is cool. So that's how it happened.
Maybe one follow-up question on that, and it's something that I think about a lot. Did you feel as though you needed to continue to a PhD to do the type of work you did? Because sometimes I hear a lot of my colleagues say, you have a PharmD, you have a doctorate. It's not that we aren't untrained to do research. Certainly PhD is a completely different realm, but how do you feel about
Yeah,
that?
that's a really great question for anybody that's listening. I think that you will find individuals that, have PharmDs that are involved in research, and you can do some of that on the job, on the hands training. I wanted to do a master's PhD just because I wanted to be able to do like my own programming, and actually run some of these statistical analyses. I think, our traditional PharmD programs, maybe you have one, maybe two statistics classes or, epidemiology type classes. But, being kind of, geeky I was like, I really want to be able to program and run my own analyses. And that was what really pushed me to want to go that route. What was pretty exciting about, continuing in grad school was the opportunity to publish. And so, being able to, graduate from pharmacy school and then go through this graduate program, and be a published author, that was pretty exciting for me too, to contribute to literature. And so I think all those things excited me. And I kind of just told myself, you mentioned like, if you go to hospital inpatient route, you do your residency 1 or 2 more years. I literally told myself, let me just pretend that I just did 2 residencies. And that was what I was telling myself. I'm just doing an extra residency. And to kind of pursue some of the things that I had an interest in. This is totally not necessary for this career path. It's just what I found interesting, what I wanted to pursue. And I do tell people that if you have an interest in something and you've discovered that you're passionate about it, go for it. I mean, you will find it rewarding. Don't do a PhD program just because it's grueling. It can be pretty awful. You don't do it just for fun. You do it because you're actually excited about what you're going to be learning about. And so that's what made a difference for me. I found something I really wanted to research and study about. And that's what allowed me to take that extra time to do it.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I get mixed answers from people who've pursued a PhD.
And that's
in the
interesting. I feel like I've never met someone with a PhD who's regretted having gotten one. And when you have it, it opens many doors, but that does not mean you need it for every door. So I hope that kind of, explains that. You don't need it for every door, but when you have it, it is helpful. Don't do it just to check a box. No way. No way. It's too much time and effort. You do it because there is literally some, field of study that you can't stop thinking about, and it demands that much of your attention to just like uncover all the layers.
It's very nice to hear a different perspective. I think most of mine is like a stay away, but it's good to hear the other side. Okay, why don't we turn it to the question? I will not say the name because I'm probably going to butcher it. But the question here is, I, for one, am interested in farm informatics as well as health IT. My only question is, how can I find summer internships? What are the keywords I should use to search? What do you think?
Ooh, well, how about you go to usajobs.gov? Because my office, my agency, we are hiring summer interns. So anyone who's interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. I don't know, Brian, or if you can like put my contact information, or we're on LinkedIn. Reach out, give me a call. We take interns. We have paid and unpaid opportunities. We also have fellowship opportunities. That's how I met Brian. Brian, you pursued, postgraduate work yourself, and you came through our office, and that was pretty awesome as well. So there are opportunities, working at the federal level at ONC. And if there are other interests that you have, I'd be happy to work the network and find out what other opportunities there might be that aren't necessarily in the federal space as well.
Oh, I love that. I think it'd be great if we got more pharmacy interns into there. Is that okay? I shared your HHS email.
Yeah, perfect. Listen, I work for everybody here on this call, so you can share my email. You can share my email.
Awesome. Okay. Why don't we take, let's see. Okay, that's not a question. Comment from Carrie, interested in health AI with emphasis on pharmacy practice. Don't believe there's such a field right now, especially with PGX. I don't know how you feel about that, Tricia.
I am assuming by PGX that Carrie's referring to pharmacogenomics. That's what I'm going to assume. Listen, when we talk about informatics and we talk about, pharmacy and pharmacy informatics, Brian, and that's why, you're doing all this. This is the cutting edge. This is like the crosshairs of things that exist, things that don't exist, and things that are yet to be. So I will tell you that the question of saying that you're not sure if that is such a field, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a niche carved out specifically, but there are people working on answering these questions. People like you who have an interest, who just literally start digging and making things happen. Would love to talk with you more about it, Carrie. I will just say that anybody you have companies that are in the AI space that are working on pharmacy problems or working on medication management problems. And that's typically how you'd see things play out, is that you have a company, a startup that's trying to solve a healthcare problem around medication use or medication safety, and then they employ AI for that. So there's many different ways you can look at this, Carrie, whether it's starting out in AI and then bringing your, pharmacy skills to that, or just saying, hey, I'm a pharmacist and I can help and consult with tech companies and startups on how, their programs can be relevant to the work that we do. I will just add in, because I kind of understand where the question's coming from. For me, working in health IT, I am not an informatician. I did not receive formal training in any of this. When I was in pharmacy school, this wasn't a thing. I started working, and we'll probably get to this, Brian. And then it was just like, hey, you're a pharmacist. We need you on this project. And I'm like, what? What is this? Right? Pretty much there are people out here, great, smart, super great programmers and technology wonks, and they are working to do things that are amazing, but they lack the information and skill set that we have. And so I see it more as a symbiotic relationship. I don't need to necessarily be able to write code for an app or a software platform, but my colleagues who are doing those things and don't get at all medication management, they can look to me to say, how do we make this relevant? How does this actually work for the patient? What do we really need to make this thing work? And so I would say you don't necessarily have to have all those tools on your own belt. What it is really that we're all being collaborative. It's really the same thing. A collaborative practice is just that the clinical and the tech meet, and then we solve problems. And I guess in our field, we call it use cases. We find a use case that's around pharmacy or medication use, medication management. You get to work on it, and all of a sudden you have a cool new innovation.
I love it. I feel like, Tricia, you should be hosting your own because you have a lot of great energy and enthusiasm.
I love it. I love the questions. I've been in this place, and I know how critical it is when you're sitting there like, I don't want to go to retail. Like, the retail is chasing you. Like, I don't want to go there. No offense to anybody who wants to go to retail, but I get it. If you don't, you want to know what your options are and what is out there. So I'm excited just because I know this is a big and important conversation for people who are at that crossroads.
Mm-hmm. And it's great to get a different perspective too, because again, you have a very unique perspective to offer the audience here. Okay, let's circle back to some of the questions on your pathway, and we'll go back to the comments. Segueing off your original comments about this is 4 years pharmacy school, 4 years PhD, so finances are always a huge consideration. When it comes to thinking about this. I mean, that's a lot of training and money. So, I do see you were a graduate assistant for the 4 years you were in your PhD, but I also saw that you did a year of retail at CVS, and then a few years as an inpatient pharmacist at West Virginia University. So 2 questions here, but we'll start with the first one. Can you tell me more about your experience balancing your PhD studies while also working?
Yeah, so, money is always an issue, right? It's like, how are you going to eat? How are you going to live? You don't want to be like, the broke college student forever. I found a program that would support me. So, in a typical research type of PhD program, you receive a stipend, a living stipend, and you are working as a graduate research assistant or a teaching assistant. And so I specifically sought out programs that would provide that opportunity that while I'm enrolled, as I'm grading, coursework for, undergrads or helping assist other professors in lectures, that I'm receiving compensation for that. I did, I was very eager to put my, pharmacy degree and license to practice. So yeah, I worked in a retail setting. I worked at the hospital. And, just being a pharmacist, you guys already know, it's a very flexible profession. So I was able to work, night shifts. I was able to work, evening shifts. So it wasn't difficult to, still be able to do some of those things. And I guess to me, it was really important not to separate the two. And that's important, Brian. I had opportunities to go to graduate school in a number of places, but I specifically looked for a graduate program that was in a school of pharmacy. I didn't go to a graduate program in a public health department or public policy department or any other department. I was looking specifically for a graduate program that was in a school of pharmacy, just because I wanted my research to be informed from the clinical practice and vice versa. So yeah, for me, it was just finding opportunities to still kind of feel grounded in my pharmacy degree, while pursuing this. And of course, it helped having some extra income as well. It's not like you're going to be rich as a graduate student. You get enough to survive, really.
Okay. And I feel as though I know the answer to the next question, but do you feel as though working at the same time, especially like your retail year and then your inpatient pharmacy job, did you feel as though that enhanced your PhD experience, or was it more so just that you needed more money?
I think it enhanced. I mean, having a pharmacy degree and practicing pharmacy is it's awesome. I mean, you get to see and experience so much, and I appreciate it. You know, one thing, the university that I went to, West Virginia University, opened my eyes to a lot of different patient care issues than I was accustomed to. I'm from New York City, so I get the whole, urban disparities, urban healthcare issues. But being at a university in Appalachia, it was really important and valuable getting to see rural health issues, and be able to see access to care from a whole, another perspective. And so I do feel like some of the things that I experienced, working at the hospital, some of the types of individuals that we treated and saw, did inform the type of research questions that I was, interested in. So yeah, I think that the two work really well hand in hand. And of course, as you're implying, it doesn't hurt to have a little extra income.
I love it. I love it. I always feel like it's nice to do, but it is a lot of work, I imagine, balancing all these kind of things at once.
Yeah, and that's why I say you don't do it you don't do this just for fun. You don't do it, I mean, just to say like, oh, let's see how many degrees I can collect. You know what I mean? Go catch them. No, you do it because you found something that you feel is really worth that time investment. And I can say that, yeah, it was tough, but I enjoyed it because I got to ask the questions I was interested in. I mean, when you go to graduate school, yes, you have coursework that you are required to do, but it's completely different than undergrad and pharmacy school where the curriculum is completely locked in. At this level, you are pursuing some of your own interests, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to look into some of the things that I found interesting, and that's why I went that route, and that's why I think it worked for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I can see when someone really enjoys it. So my sister is actually graduating with her PhD next week, and she has like that same level of enthusiasm. She loves to talk about that topic. So it's I feel like people who really love it, that's something meant for them. Well,
Congrats to her, by the way.
oh yeah, she's
Yeah.
she's really excited after all these years and stuff, right? Um, before we go back to the comments, just because we're on this pathway, I don't want to break up the momentum that we have here. So you gave us a nice picture of why you went down the PhD path, but then I want to take it a different direction. Your next step, after you graduated, you took on a role as a project officer, for a year, but then it evolved into a pharmacy advisor role at the ONC. And this is intriguing in so many different ways because I feel as though who thinks about going to government afterwards, especially ONC. So a couple of questions here. The first one being, a federal position at the ONC seems completely out of left field, given your studies in pharmacy. Can you tell me more about your rationale behind that decision in choosing a career with the ONC?
It was surprising to me too, Brian. So literally, I'm a pharmacist. I just have this newly minted PhD, researcher, ready to go attack a data set and do all this cool stuff. And I hear about ONC. I'm like, what is that? Health IT? Huh? So literally, there was an opportunity at the time. ONC had a program, the Beacon Community Program. It was a grant program. They had funded different health IT initiatives and quality improvement initiatives across the country. And the program was wrapping up, and it was time for the evaluation period. And so I applied to be a project officer, and in my mind, assist with this huge undertaking of evaluating did the investment, change lives, change and impact patient care and meet these particular goals. That was my mindset. I feel like in a way, I had certain expectations and there was a big switcheroo of sorts, when I got into this position and, just really ready to dig into all these things. We already had some federal contractors that were really managing the day-to-day on the evaluation analysis. And as a project officer, I was kind of managing those people. So I was kind of one step removed from the actual hands-on evaluation work that I thought I was going to be able to get more involved in. But it actually ended up working out just fine. As you mentioned, there was this huge pivot from being a project officer to becoming a pharmacy advisor. And literally, it was like my second week there that someone was like, "Hey, you're a pharmacist. Call the pharmacist." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me. Yeah, over here." And same thing. I'm like, what do you need a pharmacist for? Is somebody going to ask me a drug informatics question? Like what? I don't know. Or show me some weird, rash or something and ask me about it. No. So literally, they wanted and needed expertise to assist in a lot of the work that was taking place around quality measure development and some medication safety initiatives that were taking place. At this time, we were also really getting into our work on the opioid epidemic and how prescription drug monitoring programs could help support providing that access to the data to healthcare providers. And so it was a real critical point where ONC was doing a lot of medication heavy work and did not have a dedicated individuals with that kind of pharmacy expertise. And so we had a lot of super smart people working on this, public policy folks, public health folks, MBAs, people that, were doing their best, but don't have a pharmacy background. So it was kind of like being able to add that extra oomph to some of our work along those lines. So it really was me kind of being in the right place at the right time. And I'd say that's kind of how that worked out. And just super blessed to have been there at that time to really kind of come into the role and really own it.
Yeah, I feel as though right time, right place comes up more often than not.
Yeah.
But what's even more interesting to me is that I recall, and I apologize, I forgot. I remember that you said that you were like either the first or second pharmacist at the ONC. The first.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then I convinced them to hire the second. Like, we need more. Yeah.
How do you feel about that? I mean, I think it worked. I mean, assuming it worked out really well because you're saying very medication heavy initiatives, but overall, how do you feel about being the first pharmacist at the ONC?
It's interesting to hear you say it like it's a thing, like, oh, that's a thing, huh? Like, but I guess like hearing you say it, like, okay, I guess it is a thing. It is what it is. It happened. I feel like it was one of those things where it's like, let me represent my profession to the best of my ability. Let me share what I can bring to the table. There were times where I definitely was intimidated. Like, I'm working with people who, are, really steeped in technology, and I didn't have that training. But I realized that it wasn't about what I lacked necessarily, but what I had to bring, and that my colleagues didn't have or didn't understand, how prescription routing happens. They didn't understand, what pharmacists do. They didn't understand medication safety. And so being able to, bring that, it was really helpful. And of course, I learned along the way to the point where now, I have a wealth of knowledge that I didn't get from pharmacy school. But I've learned, by being so heavily involved in, health IT.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more value. I echo the same sentiments you had when I was there for my internship. There's so much value you bring from the pharmacy side, despite lacking some of the maybe technical skills that everyone else had. Let's pivot real quick to some of the comments, since some came in already. I'm going to primarily only let you answer them because people see me all the time. I want to give you your spot here. Comment here is question is, what are your favorite things about pharmacy informatics? I have so many things on how to improve quality of life for both pharmacists and customers alike. What do you think?
My favorite thing about pharmacy informatics is it's just kind of wide open. It's really not baked. I mean, there's so much to do. I mean, there's so much that has been done, but there's so much more to do. And, some of the comments around pharmacogenomics, digital therapeutics, it's like we are just scratching the surface on how far we can take, technology applications within, the field and profession of pharmacy. So I feel like sky is the limit. I don't feel like I'm in an area that I'm going to tap out or max out. I feel like, there's always room for more problems to solve, more issues coming up. And I love that. That might not be what you were looking for, but I think it's exciting to know that there's more to do, and I won't get bored, pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's never the same day. It always keeps us on our toes. A couple more comments before we jump back in, because I see Brian asked one that was very related to your career trajectory here. But Carrie says, kudos to our retail pharmacists who are on the front line. Lou says, really enthusiastic about your PhD, Dr. Lee. See, people like the enthusiasm. It's great. And then Brian says, how much has your pharmacy team / department grown since you began? And what would you say contribute to that growth? I think that's a great question.
That is a great, great question. And I love that you assume I have a team or department. For years, it was, department of one. And I will say, not because there was not a realization that we needed to have more pharmacists at ONC, but I'd say that we did the best that we could with our budgetary constraints. Federal government, the executive branch, we execute on directives and different initiatives, but our budget's determined by Congress. So the legislative branch appropriates our funds. And so at any given time, we are working with what we've been appropriated. And so the department of one pharmacist remained that way for a long time, just because we didn't have appropriations to really expand and do more hiring at the level that we might have wanted to. Doesn't mean that we didn't keep making things happen. I mean, we made things happen. There are opportunities in federal government where you can actually, borrow people from other agencies. So, between the internships and what we call interagency details, we would find public health service pharmacists and bring them in on projects. So we've been creative in how we got the extra help. But FTEs, it was at our height, we had 2 pharmacists. So, we are a lean office. We do a lot. I always say ONC, we punch above our weight. But, we hats off to all of us, because we do a lot with what we have. And I hope that answers the question. What I would say would continue to contribute to that growth. I'm hopeful that eventually, as our budget can increase from Congress, that we'll be able to get more folks in on this. But for now, we work with interns, we work with contractors, we work with the interagency folks we can pull over for projects. And in that way, we kind of expand or amplify our reach by tapping expertise where we can find it.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. It's awesome that you can just pull from other agencies as well. And I recall working with a lot of pharmacists in the FDA and even CDC. So good use of resources. I guess that's a great segue to the next question, because you were a team of 1 or max 2. You obviously managed a lot of projects during that time there. Can you just tell me maybe what was one that you enjoyed the most or you found the most challenging?
When I saw this question, only one thing came to mind, because it was the most enjoyable and the most challenging. And it was like, what? So we had this initiative that we call it the MedList project. And basically, our national coordinator at the time had this idea that, a patient, an individual, should be able to pull a complete and comprehensive view of all their medications in one single view from anywhere, right? Medications I've received from outpatient care, from a clinic, from the hospital, my entire medication profile and history should be viewable at any point in time from any source. As you can imagine, that, at the time, it wasn't a thing. And even now, that's challenging to do. You would really just have to pull, each individual healthcare facility just has the view of what they know of, or possibly they could get a med history from a prescription network, but you as a patient might not have a view of everything you've ever received, unless you get all your medications filled at one pharmacy, but That's not what we're talking about. So we had a project where we got together a bunch of EHR vendors, a bunch of health application developers, a number of health systems, technology departments, and we said, hey, all of you have medication lists for the patients that you serve, and all of you are using different EMR and technology, whether it's Epic or Cerner or Allscripts or any of these things, Meditech. And we want you to be able to respond to a request from a third-party app that a patient might have, requesting a pull down of all their medications. And so the actual workflow was a patient would download this app, and as they're filling out their profile, they would say, populate my med profile from all these places that I've visited, or I visited care, I've received care from all these places. And then it would generate and pull their entire medication profile that they can then do things with. That it sounds like something that should be pretty straightforward, but it was like herding cats and wrangling monkeys. I don't know. But it was just a lot of, of effort in trying to get these systems to talk to each other in a way that was also secure for a third-party app. So there were parts of it that were pretty straightforward. Like I can get, one doctor's office to talk to one hospital. But then you throw in the layer of the third-party app, and it's just like, oh, I don't know. We don't have we don't have the security protocols to share with this, particular app. So we worked through a lot of different issues around the standards, around the timeliness of the request and the response, and around the data privacy and security, because we're not talking about a patient walking into a healthcare facility. We're talking about someone on a smartphone at home, using this application that now the hospital has to trust, and ensure that this is not, a rogue or, a bad actor that's trying to get access to this information. So it was really fun doing that, but also super challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that, I guess, is nice. And I don't think we can get into it because it's going to be so long with the whole 21st Century Cures Act and all the things that ONC has done to even move us further along in that space. I'm going to skip that. And maybe you have the next question already covered, but I'm just kind of curious if there's anything else you had to add. You were at the ONC between 2013 and 2017, which was like right smack in the middle of the most important piece of legislation in health IT, which was High Tech Act or meaningful use. What was that experience like? Like, how did you feel? Like, just overall feelings. What are your thoughts?
It's funny because we have this thing at ONC where we called ourselves, instead of the Office of the National Coordinator, we called ourselves the Office of No Christmas. And the Office of No Christmas. I mean, folks were working around the clock, and not because we're not allowed to take Christmas, but there was just so much to do, and it was an exciting time that people were giving up, holiday time to get things done, to get rules out, to read review comments. We're a healthy, we're still small, but we're a healthy size now. But even then, we were not, drastically smaller than we are now. So there was a lot of folks and teams working around the clock. I would say it was this all hands on deck, just a fun time, fun and busy. I would say we were not one of those government offices that might have a reputation for being a slow bureaucratic, place. Things were always moving pretty fast. And that was pretty exciting because, that's not usually what you hear about government employment. It's like, oh, you're just going to be sitting there, pushing paper or, sharpening your pencil. Not at ONC and not at any of the agencies that we interface with. So unclear, where that is. But for us, it was a really fun time, and a lot of work happened during that time. And I appreciate you acknowledging that so much went on during those years.
Yeah, I mean, I even think back to the timelines, and they were very aggressive. So I imagine how much work that went into them, and it happened. I mean, the U.S. has pretty much EHRs everywhere, and all the stuff that you guys had described in there. It's impressive. But the next thing to segue into is like this completely shifted now. So after you left the ONC, you took a director of pharmacy affairs position at AMCP for the next 2.5 years. So you're leaving federal government now to a nonprofit. Lots of great accomplishments that I found during your time there. You had a 2018 publication about patient-reported outcomes, a 2019 AMC partnership publication on prior auths, and in a 2020 you received acknowledgement for a review of ASHP's long-range vision for the pharmacy workforce. I mean, those are just some of the highlights that I found. I'm sure there's a lot more other ones, and I'm guessing ONC had influence over your work there. So a couple questions here. The first one is, you had all this great projects at the ONC. Can you tell me more about why you decided to switch into a nonprofit role versus staying in the federal
Yeah,
government?
I feel as though, in my heart, I am a pharmacist and I love the, federal work working at ONC. Clearly, I'm back. But, I found an opportunity to go to AMCP and for me to do and spend some time contributing to advancing our profession. And that's kind of what was motivating that decision. I wanted to be in a place that at a time and a place where I felt like I was contributing not just to healthcare at large, but I wanted to do something very specific for the profession of pharmacy. And because I had already done that AMCP foundation internship way back when I was in pharmacy school, I was just like, you know what, let's bring it full circle. I don't mind contributing to the organization that opened my eyes to this whole awesome, career path, and working there at AMCP and helping to move, the needle on some important things around value-based care and, pharmacy clinical services and thinking about, how the pharmacy benefit really can work for everyone. And so it was a time where I just felt like this is it. Like I can step away, I can do some things, and we can see what goes from there.
Okay, and then we have one more question on that topic, and then we're gonna switch over to the comments because they're starting to build up. Um,
Yeah.
just thinking from the perspective of a student, now you shared PhD perspective, federal government perspective, and in my mind, if I was a student, I'd be thinking, what is AMCP like? How does that kind of differ? What's the similarities? So the general question, you can answer it however you feel makes sense. What was your experience like working at kind of this nonprofit space?
It was kind of cool. I mean, I went from, in federal government, I worked with all kinds of people. And then working at AMCP kind of felt like going home. It was like, I am not explaining myself to people. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that in federal government when you're the only pharmacist in an agency. And you are representing your profession and you're constantly explaining, medication terms and pharmacy things and whatever. But going to AMCP, it was just like, okay, I'm amongst my own. So there was a little bit of, that I felt like I was coming home. I'd already done the internship when I was in pharmacy school. That was through the foundation, AMCP Foundation. So I was very comfortable there, but I saw it as an opportunity to do something specific for my profession. And it was an exciting time and great people that I got to work with. And specifically around, the work that they do around the medication benefit and managed care pharmacists and all that they do. So yeah, I enjoyed the time.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that I felt very similar in that aspect. Sometimes you feel like you're alone when you're in that. When I was at ONC, at least, I felt like I'm the only pharmacist, and it's different kind of experience. But cool. Let's move to the comments.
Yeah.
Going back to Carrie. Carrie says, "Great question." She says, "I'm exploring Kaggle right now and would love to see more pharmacy related AI projects posted in Kaggle." Byron says, "Hey, Brian and esteemed guests, I currently work as an outpatient medical coder. However, I'll be given access to Epic Self Study." And Andrea, awesome. Nice to have Andrea here. I'm sure you probably worked with Andrea. She interfaces with ONC quite a bit. She says, combining meaningful use in third-party pharmacy app questions. Do you feel that EHR interoperability functionality amongst customers of the same vendor, or or when sharing data across vendors, as literature has indicated?"
Oh, what's the my it's kind of scrolled down for me. I see the lead in, but I don't see the question. Do you feel
Oh, let's do that.
okay? Yeah.
I didn't even know you can do that.
Oh, do I feel interoperable amongst? I'm assuming that the question is what is interoperability? Is it between the same vendor or across? So, at the heart, interoperability is really it's about exchange and use of that data. So, you want to be able to exchange information across different vendor platforms in a way that makes it usable. Just getting the information from A to B, and you can't really do anything with it or interpret it isn't helpful. I would say that you can have functionality with customers of the same vendor and still have issues when you have product versioning. So you can have the same vendor, but if you are on an outdated version or somehow your organization has made some customizations that have tweaked things to such an extent that you've lost that ability to exchange and use information, then yeah, you've compromised your interoperability. A lot of us do think about it though the normative way to think about it would be between separate vendors, right? You want to be able to go to one hospital and then another on completely different systems, and everybody can get your record. But I would say the challenges of interoperability across vendor platforms can still exist even within the same vendor.
Okay. Let's move on to another question here. Byron says, I also started a master's program at George Mason University in April. Congrats.
Awesome.
Will my studies in EPIC be beneficial to master's in healthcare administration?
Yes, yes, yes. Easy question.
There you go. There you go. I don't think there's other questions. Carrie says, what a great project, working on that since pharmacy school, which has been 20 years ago. So many moving parts, OTC, discontinued meds, duplications. Maybe we'll take the last question from Andrew and then we can move on
Yeah.
to the other one. So let me see if I can do that again. Here it is. Is it better with pharmacy data within the same vendor versus across? It's just working with the third-party app you mentioned.
Ooh, I would love some of those articles. I love Andrea. I love seeing what folks are up to. If you have pharmacy data if you have pharmacy data that is inside your own organization or system, it is easier to trust that information because you know exactly how you might have set up your data tables. You have your own quality checks and balances. I think there is some concern when you're working with third-party apps. If you don't know the source or you're unclear of how that application was built or is being run, that the information that you're getting is of the same quality as the information you're housing. And I think, that's a great question because sometimes the interoperability challenges are not technical ones. It's not because the information cannot flow. It's because there is this breakdown in trust that, if you're at an institution that really values cleaning data and having a really, great quality assurance processes, you might really question and worry about bringing in data from external sources that might muck up, so to speak, your records or your records. And so I think that there is certainly a level of trust that needs to be established and ways that we can verify on both ends that the external data that's coming into a system is data that's of high integrity and high quality and not something that's super old or outdated or will come into your record and just not be a value.
Okay. Let's move on to the next part of your career journey because you make another pivot here. This one's pretty exciting. You make a lot of pivots,
I know.
Which is cool, which is super cool because you're giving students a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
This one's very interesting to me. So you finish your role at AMCP and then you switch into management consulting for health IT. As a government affairs and health IT strategist. So, a couple questions on this, with the first one being Can you tell me more about your thought process here, as it's a very intriguing pathway going from federal to nonprofit now to management consulting? So, what were you thinking?
Now, you kept asking me about money earlier on, and I won't lie. Money sure came into this decision. Yeah, private sector, management consulting, it pays. But, that was not the only motivating factor. Doing the work that we do, you come across individuals and groups and companies that do great things. And, I would say overall, I've always felt like I've been helping to solve problems, whether it's problems in healthcare at large or problems in our profession. And I felt like, going into management consulting was an opportunity to solve corporate problems. And those were our clients. We had big companies that also have tough problems they need to solve. I can tell you what was the most exciting thing about being in management consulting. You get to look under the hood and behind the curtain, if you would, at some of these companies. You get access to information that you don't get otherwise. And that was really cool. We're going to be consulting and helping companies solve their data problems and their interoperability problems. We got to know what's going on. And so just from the kind of, curiosity that I had, it was really fun to really get to see, like, oh, that's how this particular tech company operates, or oh, cool, that's how this really works and flows. So my thirst for information was certainly satisfied, and I still felt like I was helping in some way, because that's what management consultants do. Instead of helping, the taxpayer, we were helping these companies.
Yeah, it's super fascinating of a field. And then, to be honest, I've looked into management consulting for my own personal interest too, so it's very intriguing. Now, as I was looking into the types of things you did there, I came across a lot of blogs that you've written. Maybe more of a comment, but it leads into the question. But you wrote about digital therapeutics, telemedicine, precision medicine, very different, all unique topics. And you're definitely ahead of the game for the telemedicine article, because that was in December 2019, right before the pandemic. Um, and as I was going through this, it made me think like, oh, this is interesting. Was this part of your management consulting role? Like, it made me think like, what is your typical role like a day in a life?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of the writing that, we did in the blogs and putting out different opinion pieces and thought leadership pieces, in management consulting, people are hiring experts that know something about something. And so you have the opportunity to demonstrate that when you're writing about things. And so you're not going to hire consultants that, are 10 steps behind. You want to hire consultants that are 10 steps ahead. And it was really fun for us, at least for me, working with a team of folks that we get to shine the light on, for some of these companies on, this is really the direction you guys should be moving in. These are where you should make your investments. When you look at any particular company at any point in time, they have their investments that they have that, they're running right now, but they're always thinking about what's for tomorrow. And they hire folks like me and others to help them think about what is tomorrow. And that's pretty fun and pretty cool because, the private sector, they have funds to explore a lot of really cool things. And I think, that's what made it really exciting, is that we work with companies that had these, discretionary budgets and these funds to go and explore interesting things. Again, because, for a company, a for-profit company, they stay alive when they stay ahead. And so we got to explore really cool topics like the ones you mentioned with some of these companies that were, exploring some of these for themselves.
Mm. And they probably hit gold when they got you, because you came from all these different experiences. So it's nice to get someone with such a breadth of experience. We can pivot to the next one, but we'll read a couple of comments. I didn't see any questions that came in.
Oh, thanks for the article links. I see that Andrea chatted those in.
Thank you. Yep, lots of articles, so I can definitely send those to you.
Yeah, great.
And look at this. This is the comment of the live stream right here. That is it. Super cool. Okay, let's pivot to the last part of your interview here, which is focused on your current role, which you're in now. So after all these different roles, You went to all these different places. You came back
I'm
to the
back.
ANC. Back. So a couple of questions here. Can you tell me more about why you pivoted back?
Because the
I'll start with
work
that.
is not done. I mentioned earlier that, it's one of those fields where you just keep scratching, the layers keep going on, and just there's more work to be done. Honestly, I worked with, first round, such an awesome group of professionals at ONC, amazing people that, friends for life, people that have been, come to my wedding, personal events, like real solid quality people. And I feel like beyond all the great work that we do, we have amazing people on staff. It was not hard to come back to this team at all. I will tell you that, when I was a pharmacy advisor, I worked for our director of the Office of Technology. While I left, he became the deputy national coordinator, so kind of number 2 at our agency. And when I heard that he was ready to rebuilding his team and bringing on new people, and he reached out, I was like, of course I'll come back and work for you. Like, the relationships and the work brought me back. I never had, even though I left, I never had anything negative to say about the place. I really just had a desire to pursue some different things. And so it was really easy to come back because we're still doing great work. And again, it's still such an awesome team that, when you can find that combination of good work and good people, it's not hard.
Nice. Yeah, I loved my time at ONC, even though it was like a very
Yeah,
short time. But I can't be biased here. I can't be biased. It was an amazing team. So definitely one of the most life-changing experiences I've had. This next one, I'm not sure how to phrase the question. Like I have the question, but it was let me just jump right into it. So I noticed, during your time here in the last few years, you have been a lot involved with a lot of advisory boards and different committees. Some examples here: you have State All Payers Claim Database Advisory Committee, Prometheus Analytics Industry Committee, and then most recently appointed to the 2022 Board of Directors for Pharmacy Quality Alliance. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks.
I imagine that stakeholder engagement, which is I think one of the first things that come up in my mind when it comes to ONC. 2 questions on this. The first thing is, can you elaborate on this and what your experience was like?
Yeah, so all these board appointments are current at this time. And I think all the things that we're talking about here for pharmacy informatics and healthcare informatics, the issues are not going to be solved by one individual, one company, one perspective. It really requires a lot of different collaborations. And so ONC, we have a culture where, we like to get in there, roll up our sleeves with our, industry partners. We want to be on the front line where the conversations are happening. And so if it's committees, if it's board appointments, we'll participate. We'll have a non-voting, role. But we want to be there discussing the hard issues, whether it's with professional associations, conferences, meetings. And so it's not hard for us to just say yes, when we get a call to, participate in a committee or a board appointment. Particularly these 3 appointments, roles that I have are super cool. The State All Payer Claims Database, that was a federal appointment with the Treasury Department. They actually have requirements to help standardize data reporting for the information that's collected from health insurance companies that operate in different states. So that was pretty cool. And some of that includes pharmacy data, and includes medical data, includes, dental data, but that was cool. The Prometheus board, Change Healthcare has convened a number of different experts from healthcare, health payers, healthcare organizations, and they're really thinking hard about, episodes of care and how do you really define quality and what that looks like. And then the Pharmacy Quality Alliance, PQA, they are, have, quality measures that are used in star rating programs and in other types of endeavors that, again, really promote really safe, sound medication use. And so we like to be where the work is happening. to lend our expertise and to hear from everybody else on what the tough issues are. So it's always really fun when we can be involved, and when I get to be involved in things like this.
Yeah, as as you were talking about all this, I think what came to my mind was Carmen. So I worked with Carmen, who is also your colleague at the ONC when I was at the ONC, and I think this came to my mind because of how amazing she was at engaging with stakeholders. Like the people at the ONC are truly really good at making those relationships happen, building the rapport. And I think that's something that I admire a lot. And it made me think of this question, which is what percentage of your overall work goes towards stakeholder engagement activities?
I thought about pulling up my calendar and then trying to like calculate. Um, that's a really good question. There have been times on certain work streams it's approached 50%. That half of my time is spent talking to non-federal people. Um, it varies anywhere, I'd say, from 25% up to at most half my time. And I would say it's the same thing. Like, we're not solving these. Government does not have all the answers. I do not have all the answers, and we're only going to solve problems and make regulations and policies that work for everyone if we're actually talking to everyone. So I appreciate so much when folks return phone calls, respond to emails, and don't mind getting on calls with us and letting me ask questions. I mean, I spend a good amount of time just listening to folks too, like what in the world is happening where you're practicing, like what is really going on, because we're hearing these things, but what's the real story? So, it's really important for us to have those honest and open conversations with folks that can really let us know, is this policy actually working where you are? Is it making things harder? What are those things? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so people who go into this role definitely would expect to engage with a lot of different people. Um,
I mean, it'll only help make your work better. If you choose
Yeah.
not to, then okay. But it'll only make things a bit easier if you have some of that outside perspective.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just thinking also in terms of like, if I was a student and I was either introverted or extroverted, it might make me think about whether I would really love this role or maybe stay away from it. But it's always interesting because people in informatics, I feel, is the stereotype is like you don't talk to people a lot. But
Oh, we have
anyways,
some of those people too, and that's okay.
oh, okay,
There's a role for everyone.
there you go.
You play your part.
So I think, usually I try to keep these to 1 hour, which is getting close now. We have a few overarching questions that I like to end with as we
Sure.
wrap up this interview. First question. What has been the most impactful thing or things you think have made you successful in your career?
It's exactly what we just talked about, Brian. I was not trained in informatics. It was like a passing thing, like a what is this? Being honest and asking questions helped me a lot. Um, Being able to reach out to colleagues who I could see knew what was going on, like what is this? I think that was really helpful, and I think being willing to have to network with people, I think was really helpful. I've learned a lot from others along the way, and just asking questions really, because you really don't know how something's working unless you ask, how is it working?
Hmm, I like that. Um, Next question. If you were to go back in time, what would you have wished you had known when starting off in your career?
I don't know. I think I would have wished I knew that it was going to be this fun. Honestly, I feel like when I was in pharmacy school, I felt a lot of pressure. I felt like it was just like, if I don't make the right choice, I'm doomed. Like, if I mess up and I miss out on going to retail, or I mess up and I end up in the wrong hospital, or I mess up and I'm at the wrong, whatever it is, like if I make the wrong turn, it all falls apart. I don't know. I feel like I just had a lot of pressure on myself. And looking back, as you go through like all these winding, turns that I've taken, it's totally okay to pursue the things you have an interest in. It'll all work out the way it needs to. I think that would have been good to just take that pressure off of me, that it'll be okay.
Yeah, we need to bring you on these interviews more often. You just keep everything so positive.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's
gonna
great.
be okay.
Yeah, I think career pivots is yeah. People stress about them
Well,
quite often, but
especially,
it's great.
yeah, and especially because we are talking about things that are not easily grasped or understood by everyone. So you might not find that you have your peer of folks that are rooting you on. They're more like asking more questions than like, what? You're going to go do what?
Mhm.
Why? What? And so if you don't know that what you're about to pursue is worth it for you, you can just get totally thrown off by that. And I feel like I had a lot of that. A lot of people are like, what are you doing? And I couldn't really give them an answer, like, I'm not that sure. But I think if I could go back in time, I would take a lot of that pressure off myself and just reassure myself, like, it's going to be okay. Pursue the things you have an interest in, and it will all work out.
That answer makes me think that most people are afraid of change, but you embrace change, and in fact, maybe change can be really, really good. And actually, I
Yeah.
imagine change usually is really good. So,
Yeah. It doesn't have to be the end of the world, it can be a good thing.
all right. Next question: what has been the most challenging time in your career, and why?
I'll just say this pandemic it's tough. I mean, I think, of course, we are the Office of the National Coordinator of Health Information Technology. We all, are embracing technology, but we're all learning to work remotely and virtually. And it's interesting because a lot of the great things that have happened at ONC have happened from hallway conversations, from us bumping into other staff in the elevator. Like, so many things that are big and major moved and started with these random like face-to-face interactions. And so learning to have that level of collaboration through tech is has been a challenge. I'll also say personally, I'm a new mom, yay. Finding that balance between my personal life, family, and career, that's just a new phase of life for me personally. And figuring out, where my priorities are, learning to be a lot more efficient with my time. I think, that's something that's important too.
Yeah, that's always definitely a challenge with the last one. I think anyone can probably relate to the pandemic one too. That's probably been a challenge for a lot of folks out there. Um, I have one more question here, and then we'll give Carrie the last question. Actually, extend it just a little bit. But my question for here is: what advice would you give someone that has an interest in informatics, and maybe in particular, an interest in informatics roles within the federal government?
Call me.
I like it. I like it. Yes, we need more people in, especially pharmacy people in ONC. I think that's
Yeah,
great.
give me a call. We'll walk all the way through it.
I like it. I like it. Okay, we'll cue that. Carrie's question here: if you have all the resources in the world, what would be the one thing you tackle in the pharmacy and informatics world?
Oh, wow. That is a great and amazing question. I don't think I've ever thought about if I had all the money. I've always been like, how do I work with less, right? You know, what's the number? Yeah, yeah. Well, make sure you can get in touch and get a hold of me after this for sure. Um, I think it's going to go back to how do we get the patient to have all their information in their hands? I know that we're talking about pharmacy and it's easy to talk about the med list and a medication profile, but that medication profile and medication list isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening because I have encountered different healthcare providers. I'm experiencing different healthcare challenges, and it all has to make sense. And right now, all that information is locked up here, there, and everywhere. I wish we could flip it on its head. I wish there was a way that instead of healthcare providers owning and managing entirely my clinical profile, that I had a way to kind of curate that as well. That I had a way to have that curated, and I could share that with a specialist when I go see them, or I could share that with a concierge medication for medical provider if I go see them, that I really truly owned my health record, and that somehow healthcare providers contribute to my record, as opposed to me always having to correct what they might have on their system. Just a their way of thinking about it, but I think that, interoperability is one challenge, but I don't think we're at a point yet where individuals truly own and manage their own information. I think that would be pretty cool. Maybe we start small. Maybe we start with the medication profile, and from there we get the whole record. But it just seems like something so important that, we should have. We should be able to manage on our own.
What a great way to end the interview, by the way. I might steal Carrie's question for future interviews. Like that. I love the answer. I don't have any other comments on that. I probably echo everything that you said because those are similar to my answer as well. But let's wrap up the interview since we are at time. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you got other things to do. But let's say thank you to the audience for tuning in and asking all these great questions.
Thank you for joining. Awesome questions.
And also thank you for spending an hour and 10 minutes with us, sharing your expertise and your journey and answering all of our questions. So huge thank you to you for coming on board.
Thank you, Brian, for the invitation. Thanks for the opportunity to share my story. And I'm happy to answer any questions that pop up afterwards. Reach out. Happy to help anybody who's thinking about this as a career path. And thank you, Brian, for doing this. This is really great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your email. Everyone going to contact you. But yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you again. We will all see you next time on a future episode of Pathways to Informatics. Bye, everyone.
Bye.